Welcome to the Fast Cat Podcast. I'm your host, Frank Overton, and today we are talking about the conversations we have with our one-on-one coached athletes before their important A races. Joining us are coaches Sierra
Hello.
and Jake
Hey, everybody.
to share their unique insight about what they talk about with their athletes before the race. Think of the famous pregame locker room scenes in the movies you've seen where the coach gives the motivational speech so uplifting that the team wins the game. Except actually, we're going to share some substance with what you should be thinking about based on the conversations we have. And we have some big events coming up. We have Leadville and Steamboat and Breck Epic, to name a few. But what we're going to talk about today applies to any of your A races or any of your aces in general, whether it's your A number one goal of the season or even your local criterion. And one of the reasons why we have these calls is because we've done these races before. So we have some beta, and it's our time for us to share our knowledge about these races to the coached athletes who are doing these races for the first time. And the hopes is to give them the extra edge in the beta to go on to have a great race and in some cases not make the same mistakes that we have made. And so if you're a Fast Cat one-on-one athlete, you may have heard what we're about to talk about before. And if you'd like to be a Fast Cat athlete, you can hire Coach Jake, you can hire Coach Sierra, or any of the Fast Cat coaches for that matter. Just head on over to our website, fastcatcoaching.com. And everyone, we even have a super double secret coaching deal going on right now through August 10th. If you've been paying attention to your emails from us, and props if anyone can tell me where the super double secret deal came from. It's a famous movie. So let us know if you can take your guess. But if you're a Fast Cat app subscriber, you're in luck because Coach Cat is trained on what we are about to talk about. All you got to do is ask and tell. That's right. Chat with Coach Cat and say, what should my aid station strategy be for XYZ race? What's the course like? How should I pace my race? What equipment should I think about? How should I do my nutrition? Where should I eat and drink? Coach Cat has got your back. And remember, all you have to do is you ask and tell. So use Coach Cat just like how you would converse with Coach Jake or Sierra or any coach. But if you'd like to try Coach Cat for free for 1 month, head over also to fastcatcoaching.com. Start a free trial. No credit card is required. And then thereafter, you may save 43% when you sign up with us for the year. I think that's a pretty darn good deal. 43% gets the monthly price down to less than $20 a month. And Coach Cat will be there with you instantly forever and ever, at least for a year. So those are our announcements. And real quick, let's do a review of the week. And it comes to us from Coach Cat subscriber Ben Reddy. He's on a free trial and he says, "Thank you so much for your help thus far. I'm incredibly impressed with your services and the Fast Cat app. This is looking like a keeper, and I look forward to training with you all. Coach Cat is so good. It feels like I'm getting advice and coaching from you all." All right. Thanks, Ben. That's just what we were saying. So, Jake, Sierra, let's talk locker room pre-race motivational meeting speeches. How about
Sounds like a good plan.
it? Now, before we do, we were talking about some of the races that we've been there, done that. Now, Jake, you were just at the Dust Bowl 100 this past weekend, weren't you?
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, I was out there taking photos of the athletes, but I was rode the course 3 weeks ago on our gravel simulation ride out there. But yeah, it was a great day for racing. Perfect weather, and I even ran into one of Coach Frank's athletes, Bob. He was wearing a
Bob.
Fast Cat kit, and I was like, "Oh, hey, that looks like it's a cool looking kit." So I went up and talked to him, and he was excited to call Coach Frank after the race, tell him all about his race. I think he even was on a single speed for the 100-mile gravel race.
He was, yeah. He won his age group, got sixth overall, and I actually just talked to Bob yesterday, and yeah, he was saying you were wearing your Fast Cat T-shirt, so you're easy to recognize. And everyone, what we're about to talk about, the pre-race call, is a call that I had with Bob a number of weeks ago about the Dust Bowl. I shared with him, your video, Jake, that you made of the Dust Bowl. And while I haven't done the Dust Bowl, Jake has, and he's so I'm fairly versed in it. And so I shared with all that knowledge about the course that I've learned from coaching athletes with Bob. So I had that conversation with him, and yeah, he went on to have a great race. And so everyone that's curious about the Dust Bowl, Bob said it was a well-run event. The corn was about 7 feet high, and he
I
was in it. Yeah, what's that?
I was trying to take pictures through the corn above it, and I brought a step stool, and it still wasn't high enough for me to get over the top of it to take
So
photos with.
maybe 8 feet.
Yeah, it's tall. Yeah,
How high does corn get?
I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
tall.
Oh, Bob said that like half the course was in corn and the other half was open. There was even some shade and trees. It wasn't that hot this year.
No,
Um,
it's perfect. It
yeah,
was cool at
it's
the
awesome.
start. Yeah, the biggest thing with the Dust Bowl would be all the corners. So yeah,
All the corners. Thus, our cornering gravel training tip that you made. Yeah,
yes,
check it
and
out on our YouTube channel.
it was great that all the Fast Cat athletes that actually follow our plan on or the Fast Cat app and Coach Cat came up to me and talked to me during the before and after the race. So it was good that they took advantage of that for that.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah,
fun? You're just
yeah,
like you get to meet people you've never seen
yeah,
or heard before.
yeah. But we're there to help them, so it's good.
Yeah, yeah. It's like being famous and people come up to you.
Yes.
My wife is always impressed when we go out in public and people come up and say hi to me that they listen to our podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife gets that at work occasionally. Somebody that's a cyclist will know who I am, and she won't know the race I was just doing or had done in the past. So she's always finding new things out.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Awesome. And Sierra's coming to us from van life, Dillon, Colorado. How's the altitude up there?
Oh, it's great. It's definitely there's no humidity like in North Carolina, so that's kind of nice. But definitely coming out of the humidity and up here is slightly helpful, but it's definitely been a big change with changing like my nutrition and like strategy and everything. But it's super. I'm lucky to be able to, come out with a few weeks before Breck Epic, so it's awesome.
Awesome. And so that's the big race you're prepping for, right?
Right, yeah. And then I'll jump into Steamboat with y'all, so
Just
that'll
jump
be good.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
jump on in.
Jump on in. Yes, everyone, they just released the new courses just yesterday. If you're a Fast Cat athlete, you might have gotten a little pre beta. We've been working on getting our intel of the courses. Which distance are you going to do, Sierra?
I signed up for the blue, so 100.
The 100.
Figured
Nice.
figured I would take it easy on myself, not do the black.
Yeah. Good luck on taking it easy. It's a hard 100. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Everyone, the courses are new this year. So the blue and the black are reputably have more climbing. Apparently, it's a little looser. The words chunky have been adjectives used. And the intel that we got is the roads have been recently graded. So they're a little bit loose, maybe not packed down in certain spots. However, if you're doing the red like me, I'm going to enjoy the Champagne gravel, and it's going to be less than 4 hours. So, for all of you beast mode athletes out there doing the 100 in the black, also, so just get ready. It's a little bit different than years before. And that's one of the things we'll talk with athletes about is we'll go over the course with them. There's sometimes you can't get eyes on the course. You can't ride the course, but we'll go over the Strava and the Ride with GPS profiles with them, talk about how that relates to their equipment, their tire choice, their nutrition, all the things that we're about to talk about. So let's get into it.
There
And
with those new
yeah,
courses, there is a short 4-minute video on the Steamboat website of the black course with that big climb. So you could get an idea what it looks like. It does look I mean, going up won't be as bad, but coming down it with groups and people, it might be rough. So you might want to look at that. It gives you a good idea what it might look like.
Oh, that's a good shout out.
Yeah.
We'll have to go check that out. Is that on YouTube from the Steamboat
Yeah, if you look at
website?
the Steamboat courses on their website, it's linked right below. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And
yep.
you get a pretty good, I heard the descent is narrow and
Yeah, it's like
like
big
dicey.
rocks. Yeah, big
Yeah.
rocks. It's gutted because you can see where the water flow down. So there's yeah.
Good
So
times. Yeah.
yeah,
Everyone, YouTube's wonderful these days. You can find course footage from just about any course. Like our friend Ben Delaney has got a ton of course footage up. Like if you just want to like search on what particular race you're doing, just type it into YouTube, and chances are there's someone that's filmed it. And there's a lot of racers that put that footage up, and you can get an idea for what the terrain's like, how steep, how everything. That's a good shout out. Yeah, good suggestion. Same for Leadville, same for Breck Epic, same for all the races you've done, criteriums, time trials. Um, but yeah, so Coach Jake, so everyone, first of all, we're talk about pacing. We're gonna talk about the weather, how that affects what you want to consider, nutrition, um, equipment, we'll talk about your pre-race nutrition, course recon, aid station strategy. It's kind of a thing, like to skip or not to skip, and then we'll wrap it up with any other little tidbits of wisdom for you. Jake, do you want to kick it off and talk about like pacing? Is kind of like one of the biggest things. It's like, how long is this race? How hard should I start in order to not creep and crawl in? Yeah, give us the lowdown of what you talk with your athletes about when it comes to pacing.
yeah. So the first thing I talk to with my athletes about an event they're doing is the pacing, and usually one of the questions they always have is like, "Oh, how hard should I go? What should my power be?" So yeah, it's usually the first thing we'll discuss. I think the first thing we do with my athletes is I'll look at the course, usually the course profile, because usually if there's a climb early on or something that will, or a key element that will break the race up or a pinch point, and usually we talk about racing to that point and trying to find a good group to be in. So usually that's the first thing we look at. A lot of times we talk about like pacing in that first hour, because that first hour it's going to be the hardest of the race, because that's when the group is the biggest and you're still trying to find yourself. And because they start usually everybody all together, so you don't want to get caught up racing with the pros if you're the first time beginner racer at Unbound. So because that can make for a long race. So a lot of the metrics I talk about my athletes looking at are intensity factor, or their heart rate, because that gives that good indication of their overall effort of their pace. And a lot of times it's like in that first hour, you don't want to be riding at your threshold because you're just going to blow up. So we try to find a good happy medium for that first hour, and then we discuss, like, depending on the distance of the race, maybe an overall effort to kind of look to average. Um, we look back at simulation rides, group rides, preview races to kind of figure out what they've done before, and kind of maybe where we kind of could set like a early limit to kind of hold back a little bit and find that group. So I guess that's uh, the one thing we kind of look at first with pacing.
With regards to intensity factor, Jake, do you give athletes like a range? What kind of intensity factors do you talk about
Yeah,
with?
so intense. So it's like in that first hour, I try to, no matter the distance, I usually try to keep them. I tell them point 0.9 is a max. So like, but if you're doing like Unbound, it's might be a little lower, but everybody's amped up that first hour, and everybody's gonna go probably above what they should do. A lot of times I tell people they don't want to end up in a group where they're pulling the whole time and doing most of the work. So if they can find a group of similar abilities where they can share that workload, it's the best. But yeah, in that first hour, we talk at like a 0.85, point 0.9 intensity factor. I think in a previous podcast a while ago, um, we brought a new workout to the Fast Cat library where
Oh, yeah.
you start hard with that VO2 max effort, kind of go to threshold and hold sweet spot for 20-30 minutes, and that's the perfect workout for a gravel simulation. That's exactly the kind of pacing I'm talking about when I'm talking to my athletes about pacing. Is we do that workout and go, that's kind of how your gravel race will start. So kind of use that as a reference point for you.
Nice. Yeah. And everyone, you can go back and listen to that podcast, the gravel workout. Basically, the TLDR is you're not riding hard enough to simulate your gravel races because they're really hard these days. And yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
just
it's
keep
always
getting harder.
interesting. Yeah, I talk with my athletes about intensity factor as well because some are data driven. It just kind of depends on the athlete. A lot of people want to feel it, or they just want to use their heart rate, or just think about it. But a lot of folks nowadays have power meters, and they do want something to be like that governor of not going too hard.
Yeah. And then obviously, if you've done the race before, you'll have an idea of a time you might want to do, and then you can kind of
Mm.
pace it off. Where the rest stops are. If it's the same course, similar conditions, and you kind of know where you want to be during certain points, so that can help too.
Totally. Uh, Sierra, how do you talk with your athletes with regards to pacing?
Yeah, I think looking back at the simulation rides is a big part of it. Because for me, it's something where they had the experience and like had the feeling of what it's like to. If I tell them like, okay, this is like the parameters for the beginning of your race. Well, hopefully we've already done something similar, like a similar effort. So I'll even pull up on Training Peaks with them and like we'll look back at the simulation rides and be like, do you remember when we did this? Like this is kind of what you held for this beginning of this ride, and like I would aim for this like level of effort. Um, and definitely talking about like what Jake said about the importance of getting in a good group is something that is, like every race has different kind of a different play out. So always making sure the your athlete knows beforehand like this is usually what happens in this race, and just like preparing them for kind of the inevitable, is something that I definitely go into a lot. Just trying to make it where also I will talk through anything that could possibly go wrong. So I'm like, okay, let's put you in here. You paced it perfectly. Great. Like, you need to hold on to this group, like take turns rotating. Okay, let's put you into the situation where you overdid it, maybe. Okay, so what do we need to do now if that happens? Um, or like if we maybe didn't go hard enough and you're pulling the group, like what you have to do. I definitely try to lay out every possible situation that could go wrong or right, just so that when they're in that situation they have the tools to go about it the best way.
Nice. Yeah. While y'all were giving your examples, I thought of two of mine. The Crusher and the Tusher is a pretty famous gravel race. And the first 30 minutes are on pavement. It's more or less like a 1 or 2% grade, very shallow grade while you go up the canyon. And then all of a sudden you turn right and it turns to gravel and the climb begins. And so, in terms of pacing, what you really want to do as an athlete is try to sit in as much as possible. Let the really strong people pull on the front while you draft and try to conserve. And then when you turn right on the gravel, that's when the race begins, and the pacing all of a sudden goes crazy. And I'm reminded also there's a race coming up here in Colorado. It's a mountain bike race, cross country. It's the Tipperary Creek Winter Park race. Same situation. It starts off on a gravel road for about 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, there's this hole shot into the single track as you veer off the road. And then the Tipperary Creek climb begins. And so, what you want to do is do not go to the front and drill it like a normal mountain bike race. It's the actual one or the few mountain bike races where you'll ride in a pack, chill for about 20 minutes, but then you got to be ready to like sprint and get the whole shot and give her right before, maybe like 150 meters, 200 meters before the whole shot. It's very much like you see like Mark Cavendish, like the finish of a Tour de France. And if you can get the whole shot, there's no passing. All you got to do is make it over this creek and not dab, and then you're in control the whole climb, and it's a long climb, and everyone's got to pass you. But if you can do it and make it, it's a great way to be. But if you don't and you get stuck behind the slow pokes, it's a pain in the butt to pass. So anyway, those are like examples, everyone, of like we've done these races and we know this, and like we're gonna kind of this is the exact examples of like information we like to share with our athletes. Um, and that kind of I went ahead a little bit. That gets over to the course knowledge, but we'll cover that in a second. Any other final points to make on pacing. Like, just don't go out too hard. You
Yeah.
know.
So one thing I tell my athletes all the time, there's like two things that'll ruin your race because you've done the training. You can do this well. Is if you go out too hard or if you don't stay on top of your nutrition hydration. So that's I remind them like, hey, you've done the training, you've done the work. As long as you stick to our plan with your pacing, you're going to be okay.
It's awesome. Yeah, my number one rule, in addition to that, is just don't miss the start. Just
Yeah.
be
Well,
on
that you
time.
got to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that used to be a thing. It's not with gravel because we stage like an hour ahead of time. But yeah, cross in time trials especially, like
Oh
don't
yeah.
miss your start time.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's like
Awesome.
one of the things I think that's important is thinking about, the parking before a race. Like,
Yeah,
I actually, the first year that they had BWR in North Carolina, or maybe not the first year, but one of the years, the parking was so like chaotic. It was like really last minute that I made it to the start. So definitely like thinking it out beforehand.
totally. Yeah, this is all the things we talk about, and a lot of the things we'll talk about really is just it's like street smarts and developing like a pre-race routine. And like I've for a long time, like for cyclocross, I always told my athletes, get there 2 hours ahead of time and then plan on traffic and allow yourself like give yourself extra time with regards to driving to get there 2 hours because you're going to do these 8 things as soon as you get there. And so you got to like work backwards from the time that the race begins. And yeah, it's even a thing in gravel. And it's even worse when it's cold and dark at 5 a.m. You gotta think through those things. So those are things we as coaches, we're like your mom who nags you.
Because we've been there and done that and made those mistakes already.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the things we talk about in pre-race calls are just we've learned it the hard way. So we want to share it with you. So you get it right the first time. You don't have to,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Uh, awesome. Let's talk about the weather. Like, what Sierra are you a weather person? Do you like go over that with your athletes beforehand?
Yeah, definitely the weather is a big factor. It's funny actually for Unbound this year, um the weather was it varied so much leading into the race. Like it was gonna rain one day, it was gonna be really hot the next day, and then it ended up being like no rain, perfect temperature. So I ended up talking through the weather when I looked at it with my athletes, and it was gonna be like rainy, so we talked through that a lot. And then I think it was gonna be hot also, so we talked through that. But then it changed kind of like leading right into the race. So it's really important to like as the athlete also have some responsibility to like check it, like the morning of or like the day before, and just have, the preparation beforehand. But the weather can definitely, like make or break a race. There's some races out in even North Carolina where the elevation varies so much that at the bottom of the Blue Ridge Mountains it might be, like warm and you can wear, the typical like short sleeve and everything. But then when you get up to like on the mountains on the parkway, it's like snowing and raining. So definitely like having some um you check multiple points on the course is what I've learned through the years, if it's a long race. And so, yeah, I talk through the weather with my athletes a lot beforehand, and that like kind of ties into nutrition as well, and even
Mhm.
pacing if there's wind involved.
Yeah. 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 I mean, as coaches, we're kind of part-time meteorologists, and you should be too as an athlete. But we'll talk about weather beforehand, what that means for all sorts of how much you wear. I can tell for everyone that's doing Leadville for the first time this year, it's winter up there at 5 a.m. Like, bring your warm clothes. In the start crowd, there's people wearing like, the puffy jackets with the hoods and long pants. It's cold. So be ready and be prepared. Yeah. Check
Yeah.
the weather.
I mean, you could just look at Unbound the last 3 years. 3 years ago, You
Hmm.
had a south wind and super hot, and they went north. So the whole way back was a headwind and hot and slow times. Last year it got wet, so it was super muddy, and you had to prepare for that. And then this year actually was pretty nice, from what I understand, and times were fast. So just being prepared for whether it's the mud, the wind, the
Hmm.
rain, yeah, the heat. Like I think Ricky and Andrew did a heat acclimation podcast, so that kind of stuff, being prepared for that and knowing what it's going to be like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Everyone, go back and listen to that episode and just picture Ricky in a Tyvek suit on the trainer doing his heat acclimation protocol.
I saw a picture of
You
it, and
I know it's crazy. I mean, the thing is, Pogachar did the same thing. He put it up on Instagram as well. But everyone, you mentioned Unbound. I mean, the thing about Unbound, it's so variable. Like the day before, it was like raining, and everyone's like has PTSD of the mud the year before, and then on race day, it was like dry and fast and hot, and so you really have to be adaptable. I remember Leadville a few years ago. It was a little bit rainy and kind of damp and cold, and the athletes were racing in leg warmers, knee warmers. Some had vests. Like some of the descents, the descent off of Columbine was like really cold, and I can't remember, like one of the Colorado guys who was good at just Colorado weather did really well because he dressed really warm, and there's that, and like some of the athletes that just didn't have the gear on to meet the weather really suffered and didn't perform that well. So definitely look at the weather in terms of gear as well, because it
Yeah,
has a big play.
I think there's an app for that, Epic Ride Weather app, which will tell
Hmm.
you like the
yeah,
conditions on the course at what time on the course and all that as well. So that's a good
yeah.
resource to use.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Check that out. Also, like you can look at like go by the hourly temperature readings because in at least out here in Colorado, it's varies greatly between nighttime and
So much.
daytime, and then also elevation. See if you can find a weather point like at the elevation you're going up to, because that also is way different. Like it may be like 85 here in Boulder, but like 70 up at 10,000 feet where you may be racing up to. Probably like where you are in Dillon. It's probably not as hot there, Sierra.
No, it's crazy. This and you're in the direct sun, it's really warm, but the shade, it's like cool. But actually, last weekend, a few days ago, I started my ride at like 7 a.m. on the bottom of Columbine, and it was
Hmm.
so cold, and I was very glad I wasn't doing the race. Maybe another time, but um, yeah, I brought a jacket with me up that climb because even though you're going hard on the top of it, um, you don't want to waste energy like heating up your body throughout the whole race. So I
Hmm.
just had extra clothes for the downhill.
Totally. Yeah. The first year of Steamboat, we started at I think it was 7 a.m. and it was kind of dark and it was 37 degrees and I did not bring anything. And so I wore my jeans to the start line and wore like a hoodie that I had camped in, and yeah, I looked foolish at the start, but everyone else was in the same boat. But next year, everyone else brought their warm weather clothes. So just be ready is kind of the thing, especially at the start, or be ready to bring gear to meet the elevation up high. But that could also apply to East Coast, and like maybe you're planning to bring like ice socks and all those cooling things. They just had Masters Nationals in Augusta. It's crazy hot. You got to do the ice socks and the vests and cool extra well because it's so extremely hot and humid. So yeah, this moral of the story: be a weather person and be prepared. Let's talk about nutrition because that's like it's kind of a thing.
Kind of.
Jake, you want to lead us out there?
Yeah. So, like I talked about before, pacing was important. Then the second thing that could ruin your race is nutrition, and along with that is hydration. So, I think we always, I think that they talk about how many grams of carbs per hour to take, and I think we've always kind of always said, well, we used to say blocks, chomps, chews like every 20 minutes, just kind of remind you to take something in every 20 minutes just to keep those things going. So uh, a lot of this goes back to simulation rides as well. It's like, what have we been using on those simulation rides is kind of what you're going to want to use race day. You're not going to want to try something new. The race may offer some kind of like their own sponsored nutrition stuff, but you probably don't want to use that unless that's something you've already been using. Uh, or maybe this race will have it. It's a big race, and you want to use their stuff. So maybe that's the stuff you buy before the race to use. And then a lot of things go into this as well. It's like how many bottles you're going to take. Are you going to use a hydration pack? Do you carry your own mix to the stations? Like Sarah was saying earlier, some of this is tied to the weather with how much you're going to need. If it's hot, you're going to need more. You're going to want water. Do you need salt tablets? Do you cramp a lot? So yeah, we really get into the weeds with this, with what you're going to take, how you're going to take it, when you're going to take it on. Also, if you're going to use the aid stations, are you going to use a drop bag? Is there feed-in allowed? So we try to go over this on the course, look at the course map, figure out where those aid stations are, figure if you can make it to that aid station on whether you're just doing bottles or if you can do the whole race with just bottles and a hydration pack, and kind of just go over that a lot. I also talk with my athletes, especially with this Dust Bowl. Some of it is paved. There's a lot of corners, so we discuss like looking at a map, like, okay, this is a paved road for a while. This is a great time to eat before you get to this section. Or if we look at another race with climbing and we're like, okay, this climb starts at mile 40, make sure, like 10 minutes before you start that climb, you're taking in some good carbohydrates then. So, it's in your system by the time you start that climb. We kind of talk about those different things.
Yeah, totally. Sierra, what do you have to add with regards to nutrition that you talk about with your athletes?
Yeah, we definitely nutrition's, like something that ideally you've practiced so much before your like pre-race talk, but I take the pre-race talk as kind of like a final reminder, because
Hmm.
kind of I have the same importance about the nutrition as Jake does. Like it can really like make or break. So it's not gonna hurt to have those like last minute nutrition like run through it really quick, kind of, to like in the race, the pre-race call. Um, but I really and then sometimes we'll have like these like final questions, like this is like what happened the last simulation ride I did, like this is what happened with what I ate, and I'm like, okay, well, um it's going to be like super hot, so maybe it's going to be harder to get down like dense food. And it sounds like that simulation ride was like during a hot day, so maybe like it's going to be similar, so like let's stick towards more of like the uh the the fluids and like getting the carbs through that way. um but yeah, I definitely talk through, I make sure that the nutrition is definitely like dialed before the race, and a lot of my athletes have that the Garmin reminder that's like set every so often
Hmm.
to tell them to eat. And that's like a good thing and a bad thing, cuz sometimes you can kind of like it doesn't really like register, and then kind of it's more important to pick out courses or parts of the course that are better to eat on. So there's definitely
Hmm.
like places where that's good to use and places where it's not really the best to use. Um, for what I think is helpful is like like pinpointing like what Jake says, like on the map, like this is like where you need to eat before this happens, like, and kind of like ideally we've kind of like talked through that, but going through it one more time is always helpful.
Yeah. One of the things I talk with my athletes about is one-handed nutrition and two-handed nutrition and no-handed nutrition. And no-handed nutrition you get from using a hydration pack where you can put the nozzle in your mouth and two hands on the handlebars. And then one-handed nutrition is just like one hand on the handlebar, reaching out, grabbing a gel or a block. Pre-open your blocks, everyone. If you're going to use chews or blocks,
Yes.
use a bento box, or just dump everything in there. Don't just dump them in your back pocket because they get wet and sweaty, and that's a bad recipe. Sticky fingers, all that. But anyway, the other thing, if you're wondering that there's a lot to talk about, you're right. And one of the things I try to do, Sierra said you both Sierra and Jake said use what you've been doing in your simulation rides. So try to dial in your nutrition then, and then for the pre-race call, we'll talk about maybe not as much nutrition because you've already kind of got that dialed in. But a lot of times, it's like, okay, you're using your hydration pack, and you're not going to be able to take your hands off your handlebars here, here, and here. Therefore, you need to eat here. Like that's one thing Bob said about the Dust Bowl, Jake, is the pavement was nice because you could just eat and drink,
Right.
liberally. And like the BWR, there's like miles and miles where you cannot. I mean, sometimes it's a stretch just to take your hand off your handlebar to get the hydration pack nozzle in your mouth because it's technical. So those are things we go over with our athletes. Um, and then how does that relate to like pre-race nutrition? Because that's also related. Like, what happens when you're racing at 7 a.m.? What do you talk with your athletes about?
Yeah, we discuss what time they're going to get up and what they're going to eat. And then, yeah, so I think a lot of this too, again, is another thing with the simulation ride. I always try to say, like, that last one, we try to, like, the one that's 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out, we try to start it at the same time the race is going to start to kind of dial that in what the morning might be like, what time you're waking up, what time you're going to eat. Are you going to make your breakfast the night before and just be able to heat it up in the morning so it's ready to go, and try to cut that time down so you can sleep in as much as possible? um, as Coach Sierra has said, eating breakfast, like then figuring out like how far away is the race from where you're staying, what park can be a challenge, how far away is the drive, things like that. So those are things to figure out. Coach Sierra can probably add on to that.
Yeah. Yeah. What about when you're in the
Yeah, one
van? How do you do breakfast, Sierra?
oh man, it's a rough time, but we have bagels is kind of the like I'll prep a bagel with peanut butter. Um
Hmm.
that's kind of like the go-to. I'm not a big oatmeal person, so that's unfortunately off the table. And then milk and cereal beforehand just isn't key, but I've definitely seen really good racers plow through a ton of cereal before races, and it works for them. But I think you might
Yeah.
need more hours to digest that dairy. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's usually
Yeah.
like a bagel, so it's kind of like easier.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone, basically you almost need to pre-prep your breakfast the day before. And so that
Hmm.
you're not spending an inordinate amount of time fixing your breakfast when you got a lot of stuff to do in the morning. I was always a big fan of leftover pasta, and man, leftover pasta and like scrambled eggs from the morning before, I just heat it up in the microwave. We've all done that. That's like a good one. And just like in a pinch, bananas and bagels and honestly energy bars. That'll get it done if you need to. So before when you go on road trips, we actually a long time ago, Jackson and I podcasted about uh, road tripping, to bike races and how you need to think about it. And like before you even depart for your trip, you kind of need to think about how you're going to have your pre-race meal at whatever 5 a.m. and like plan for that because you're not going to a restaurant at that hour. Yeah, not happening. Definitely not in the van either.
No,
But yeah,
the amount of
oftentimes,
bags I packed is so many. I have like a whole bag of nutrition and a whole bag
yeah,
of extra equipment, which we're gonna talk about in a minute, and just like so many. You have to think so far ahead when you're doing, especially a stage race. So yeah.
yeah. Speaking of equipment, let's move on from nutrition and let's talk about like what do you all talk about with your athletes for equipment? And do you talk about that months in advance or do you give like how does that differ for what you talk about months in advance versus like maybe the week before?
Go
Well,
ahead, Sarah.
we okay. We definitely talk through equipment. I do at least, you know, really far out from the race, especially if it's an A race. Ideally, we've like set up, like B priority and C priority races beforehand that we're going to use the same equipment. Or if the athlete is able to even like travel to where the race is, they'll set their bike up how they're going to race on it. And so that's something that's super helpful beforehand. But yeah, definitely going into obviously like tires is just like a never ending cycle of like what could be the best for this course. Um, and then just like kind of the hydration pack, like if they have any bags on their bike, if it's like a really long course, like talking through, like what's needed and what's not. I think that's like a big one that comes up on those really big gravel races. Um, yeah, and then I think the clothing choice is like ties into the weather, so we do like definitely hit on that a lot. But equipment is something where ideally we're not switching up too much before the race, but maybe like finalizing and like talking through the equipment that they're going to carry with them if something goes wrong. Like I said, I'm like a big component or a big opponent of like if something goes wrong, do you have everything you need? And like making sure that they know how to use it all is also really important. So like punctures, if the derailleur goes crazy, if the chain breaks, you don't have to like break it apart and put it back together. Like all of that stuff, I make sure that they have all of that equipment with them, especially if it's a longer race, because the likelihood that something could go wrong will increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like hopefully you've had an instance with a flat tire out in real the world and can know how to change that pretty well, or how to use like a dyno plug and to stop the bigger leaks and all that. So hopefully you've gone through those scenarios, or at least practice that in your garage with your cycling kit and with the tools that you will have with you on the bike. So yeah, so that's good. I guess another thing I talked to my athletes about, and I actually just saw about with the steamboat as I was watching that video earlier today when I saw the courses come out, was whether you're going to use road or mountain bike pedals. So
Mm,
if you know
yeah.
there's a chance you'll be getting off your bike, uh, you're going to want probably mountain bike pedals because the roads tend to get clogged up. So, and if you know a race coming up like that where you will be having to maybe get off your bike more than not, you might want to be using those in the training as well. So I think that's something we kind of discussed several weeks before.
Yeah. And I would add gearing. Like it's really tough to change gearing maybe like in the days or the week before the race because it often involves purchasing and a mechanic. And I always have athletes like make sure they get their gearing squared away a couple months in advance, if not even longer. Like whether that's like a smaller front tooth chain ring. Like everyone, we just did this simulation ride here in Boulder this past weekend. We did like a steamboat simulation, and we chose a course that mimicked the elevation profile of what we're going to face in Steamboat. And so we went up this road called Lick Skillet, which is horrendous because it's like average percent gradient, 14%. And that was average. There's like sections that were like 20% and greater on loose gravel. So you couldn't stand up, and then it was loose. So your back wheel was spinning out. And I'm not going to lie, I walked about 10 meters because I had a 44th tooth front chainring and I didn't prepare. Now, Ben, he had a 40. He was prepared. He's smart. He knew we were doing lick skillet, so he busted out the bike that had the 40 tooth, and he had like the big pie plate in the back running he was running the new SRAM like red Explorer 13 speed. Did y'all see that they just released that today? But anyway, he was test riding that. He did not have to walk, but everyone else did because we were ill prepared. So, when you're doing your steamboats and your Leadvilles, even your crusher and the tushers, like the having a 1-to-1 gear ratio is kind of like the beta for that race. When you do an hour climb with a 10% grade hill, make sure you got like a 34-34 essentially. And I would tell athletes that 6 months in advance because that was a tough switch on bikes back then. Because everyone was running Shimano 50-34, and there was no such thing as a 34 rear cassette as like a special order. And then you had to do like the long cage derailleur pulleys. Remember those? We've come a long way with the gravel bikes, but it applies to like mountain biking and criteriums, time trials, all the things you got to prepare months in advance, and then just get it dialed in the weeks before. Um, what about aid stations? How does that relate to nutrition? And do you stop or not? Do you wear Do you go by bottles? Do you go by hydration? Do you eat the M&Ms and M's and the cookies and all the treats, or do you just stick with energy food? What do y'all recommend?
All this goes back to what your goal is. If your goal is to win this event, like you're gonna have to do what the leaders do, and a lot of those people are just skipping these feed zones. Like I think that was a big controversy about 3 or 4 years ago when people kind of
Yeah.
transitioned from they were stopping to all of a sudden they decided they weren't, and some people weren't on that same plan. So it kind of became a big deal. So now it's like if you're in the front, you're probably not stopping. Even
Mhm.
unbound, it's like 10 seconds. You're in, you're out. Like you tell your staff have this ready because we're going. So yeah, so but if you're more or less on your, for much further back doing your thing, you can probably stop because but at least have a plan going in. Like, what do I need to do at this feeds, and how do I get through it as fast as possible? So knowing right away what your plan is to grab food, grab drinks. How do I do this, and how do I do this efficiently and fast? So just being prepared with that, and like maybe you don't have to stop at all of them. Maybe you just need to stop at one, and
Mhm.
just plan that out on the map. Where is it? Which one am I going to utilize? and and with the M and M's and stuff, it's like again, I would do what you do in training, and stick with
Yep.
that. You don't want any kind of upset something on your stomach on race day. But yeah, I mean, I'm used to the treats and the sweets, so it would be fine for me. But some people might not be able to handle that. So again, I would err on the side of caution on your big race day event. So
Wise words. How about you, Sarah? How do you approach recommending the aid stations to your athletes?
Yeah, I definitely kind of stick with the make sure you're prepared because you never know if the aid station somehow isn't going to be there or if it's not going to have what you want or like an unbound when they ran out of water. Like you just like I don't like to rely on something that's out of my control. And so having what you need is something I kind of err towards for when I'm, like advising other people.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. The biggest thing I would say these days, study the race Bible, or whatever they call the like the pre-race instructions. Like everyone should know where every single mile marker the aid station is. They should know what's in it. They should know if it's neutral or if if you are you going to get hand ups and you can just roll through. What energy company is sponsoring the race, so what drink mix is going to be in what's available, because some people have sensitive stomachs, and I've had athletes train on that nutrition because that's what they were going to get in the feed zones, and I've had other athletes, they're like, I can't do that, and so we can't plan on them taking up that particular brand's nutrition in the feed zone. So it's like the Boy Scout rule, always be prepared and you're in control, and it's up to you to know, and not find out on the fly when you really need it the most. The mile marker thing is my favorite because when you're doing these long races, it kind of gives you something to look forward to, and you're like, oh, sweet. In 1 mile, I get to take a little bit of a break and get an ice cold water and dump it on my head, and I'm gonna feel better after that. So it gives you that intermediate milestone to check off oftentimes. What about Jake? Do you take the whiskey shot when you go to the aid station? What's going on there?
I don't take whiskey shots when I'm not racing. So no.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think a
I,
lot of your approach to the aid station is also your approach to the race. If you're racing, you're not racing when you're at the aid station. You're on the clock, and Formula One pit stop, kind of like what Jake's saying. But if you're looking to have a good time, and you're maybe not, you're taking your time. The aid stations are wonderful. 2 years ago at Steamboat, I took my time and I chilled at the aid stations. Had like a Coca Cola and chatted with the volunteers and the other racers. So it's really fun. The aid stations is just a nice oasis. Sometimes in some events like Fondos, which are they do time segments, you're not on the clock at the aid station, so they're incredible. You get to take your time, and then you just got to make sure you stick with the group. You need the group. That's my one beef with the time segment fondos is like everyone just chill here for a little bit, and but yeah, some people didn't get the memo that it's not timed and they keep going. But if you do get to stop, yeah, then you can kind of like the nutrition you can take also depends on your heart rate because like if you're breathing super hard, you, you might need to have an energy bar. But if you can actually take your time, you might be able to have like a banana or something. Uh, yeah. Um, all right, you guys, gals, what else do you talk about with your athletes in the pre-race call? Did we leave anything out?
Yeah, so I guess we talk about like sometimes we talk about the course, which part of the course to ride the day before if you get there early enough to check out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of times that's normally just the start because that's going to be the most people, the most hectic. Maybe like we talked about, you talked about pinch points or a climb and just checking that out just to see what it's like to get an idea of that hard first 15 miles to see what it's like to see where the group might split to kind of know the corners inside outside what the gravel looks like. Yeah, and just checking that out the day before the race.
Yeah. What do you recommend when, I mean, like, if you can't like pre-ride 120 miles the day before, what do you recommend to the athlete? Is it just, is it start finish or is it something else?
If it's just a long 200-mile gravel race, like I'd do the start. If it's like a cross country mountain bike race, maybe you could do a lap. If it's
Mhm.
something shorter where you will have a group finish, sprint finish against a couple of people, it might be more or less the finish just to kind of see where the last point to attack might be, or yeah, where you want to start your sprint from. So I don't want to say it depends because Isaiah gets mad when we say that, but it depends on the course.
Depends is the most, I mean, if you can count on one answer from a coach is it's depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
So like a long gravel race, I would check out the start. If it's a short race, I would check out the finish. Yeah.
that's good stuff. Sarah, when it comes to like cross country mountain biking, what do you recommend to athletes?
Yeah, I definitely like riding. You can usually ride if it's a cross country short course, you can usually ride the whole thing. Um, I like focus so much on like not getting too riled up the day before and, racing the
Mm,
course. Um, but definitely for instance, like Tahoe Trail, it was like long enough where you can't do the whole thing the day before is like 30 miles. And so figuring out you can usually like find like YouTube or like word of mouth like the parts that are harder than others. We like went and rode like the technical rocky section of the trail, which wasn't really too bad, but having done it beforehand is nice because then when there's like dust in your face and you can't see anything, you've done like the
mhm.
technical part of the course. So definitely if there's like a techie part and you have time, maybe 2 days before the race, like looking at it, but also making sure you're not overdoing any course recon by, overdoing it.
Yeah. I have an athlete coming into Steamboat the Tuesday before the race, and he's doing the black. And so we have Wednesday to train because we're gonna no. So we have Wednesday, Thursday, yeah, Wednesday, Thursday to train, off Friday, shakeout openers Saturday. So he's gonna see Cow Creek and the start on Saturday. So we were strategizing how do we see the course on Wednesday, Thursday, and then also balance out that I can't send him out for a 6 hour ride before or even a
Yeah.
7 or 8 hour ride before the race. So what we've done is we looked at the course and he's going to drive to a certain like portion of the course and check out those climbs to make it like a 2 3 hour ride. See that we're going to skip like the benign champagne gravel stuff and really focus on the new stuff essentially, and then also balance that out with not riding too much and like putting fatigue in his legs before the race. And so like the day before, everyone like really that shakeout ride is keep it under 90 minutes. I like to tell athletes 75 minutes or less if I can, you know even 60 minutes or less, just a little bit, just enough, so don't like go far away checking out the course because the pros and the cons of riding too much the day before outweigh the pros. Super awesome. What else do we? Anything else to talk with athletes about before their big important races? Do you like? Do you give them like a pep talk, like the movies, like in the locker room?
Not quite, but we definitely go past their training and show them, hey man, you've done this, we've done good, you've done all this training, you're
Mm,
doing great, you'll do fine. But I think we all get nervous before these events because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But it's just about trusting the process, trust what you've done, follow the
yeah,
plan. Things might not go perfectly, but and I think that the biggest thing to remember is like there's gonna be moments in this race when you don't feel good. It's like don't get down on yourself because it comes and goes. So like you may not feel good at this point, but you'll feel better later on or come back. So don't you or like if it's like one thing when we did road races back in the day, they would say don't make any decisions on how you race based on how you feel at the start. You may feel bad, but you could feel great later on. So don't forget to eat just because you feel bad race, and get off track because of that. You're like you'll probably warm up. You'll start to feel better. Just stick with your plan. Keep eating. Keep drinking. Things could turn around, or probably will. So you might not feel great at the start, but that doesn't mean you won't feel great in the middle or the end. So always stay
yeah.
positive. Yeah,
So you do have a pep talk with them. You're talking about their mindset and how they should like their outlook and everything.
yeah. I guess I do.
There you go. I like it. Sarah, what final like sports psychology armchair psychologist coach words of wisdom do you impart?
It's very similar. Like it's kind of, you've done everything and there's nothing that we haven't practiced. Like you hired me to prepare you for this race, so like I gave you the tools and you're ready to go. Just giving them that like boost of I don't know if it's self-efficacy, but it's definitely like a self-confidence that they have everything in the tool set to do it, and like calling attention to that, and definitely like um talking through the goal one more time with them, and like even calling back like the first time they ever like brought up the goal, and like just like talking about like what we've been through since that point. I'm like, wow, just think of like the journey you've gone through to get here, and like you're ready, and like you're gonna be able to do this. But it definitely is like an amped up pep talk, and I always like am excited to hear about it. So having someone in their corner and like acknowledging that and telling them like I'm excited to hear about it, I think is good, because it's always helpful to have a support system. So I am part of that for the everybody that I coach for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well done, you two. Yeah. If you would like to get a pre race call from Coach Jake or Sierra, or any of the Fast Cat coaches, this is what we're all about. So, yeah, just give us a shout off of our website. We have a new athlete questionnaire you can fill out. We'll have a chat with you, no obligation. And then you can make your decision from there. And yeah, coaching is a wonderful thing to get if you're really into it. It's more than just a training plan. It's everything we just talked about, sharing our knowledge, having that person that's got your back, that has that plan B and C when things don't go right or your way, and really just someone that's been there, done that, and wants to help you not make the same mistakes, and do help you improve faster than maybe we did ourselves. So that's one of the beauties of hiring a coach. So yeah, think about it. Let us know. We're here. Yeah, and thanks, Jake and Sarah, for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah. You are welcome. Watch out for the chipmunks out there at altitude. Yeah. And everyone, we will be back next week. I don't know what the topic is yet. I need to check out the content calendar. We are due an Ask a Fast Cat number 28. So maybe we'll do that. You can write in to us with your questions. We're going to be live all together in Steamboat, Jake and Sierra. So we'll podcast live out there that week at altitude. We'll come up with another good topic for you. So thanks for listening, everyone. Hope your training's going well this summer. Happy August. It's August 1st here. And if you're in Colorado in the Front Range, be careful of the smoke and the air quality this week. Ask Coach Cat what you should do, or your coach. And Yeah, we'll see you next week. And you remember what to do, which is work hard, ride fast, have fun. And as always, FTFP, even though consistency is the new FTP. So thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.